The smell of Tim Hortons coffee has been sitting in this mug for 40 minutes, and I still haven't touched it. Cold. I keep doing that lately, making myself a cup, sitting down, and then just staring at nothing until it goes cold. 63 years. That's how long I've been on this earth. And I spent the last 32 of those years raising a daughter on my own, in a house on Glenwood Crescent in Sudbury, Ontario, where the winters come in hard and the neighbors still wave when you pull into the driveway. I worked the night shift at Health Sciences North for 11 of those years. Nursing assistant. My feet hurt every single day. I didn't complain. I had a daughter to feed. I also had a property. A small hobby farm just outside Chelmsford, about 20 minutes west of the city. My mother left it to me when she passed in 2009. 14 acres, a barn that needed work, a vegetable garden I kept going every summer because she had kept it going, and her mother before her. The land wasn't worth a fortune, but it was worth something. To developers who kept leaving their cards in my mailbox, it was worth quite a lot. I never returned their calls. That land wasn't for selling. My daughter, I'll call her by her role here, because that's who she became to me in the end. My daughter knew all of this. She grew up running through that property. She knew every corner of it. She used to sleep in the barn when she was 12 because she thought it was an adventure. I used to bring her hot chocolate and sit on an overturned bucket and watch her pretend she was a pioneer. I don't know where that girl went. She met her husband at a work conference in Toronto. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming, the kind where you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong, but something just sits slightly off, like a picture frame that's almost level. I tried. I genuinely tried to like him. I made him roast chicken the first time she brought him home for dinner. I asked him questions about his family, his work. He answered everything just enough to be polite and not enough to reveal anything real. My daughter looked at him like he had invented light. They got engaged 14 months after they met. She called me from Toronto on a Tuesday night, and I could hear the happiness in her voice. Real, unguarded happiness, and I cried on my end of the phone, quietly, so she wouldn't hear and think I was making it about me. I was happy for her, genuinely. Then, 3 weeks later, she called again. Different tone this time. She wanted to talk about the property. Her husband had a connection, she said. A developer out of Barrie who was putting together a project in the region. The timing was perfect, she said. Property values were peaking. It would be foolish to hold on to it. I told her the property wasn't for sale. She said she knew I'd say that, and could we just talk about it? She said her husband thought it made more sense for me to sell now, take the money, maybe move somewhere smaller, somewhere easier for one person to manage. I told her again. The property wasn't for sale. She said I was being sentimental. I said that was probably true. We didn't speak about it again for several months. I assumed she had let it go. People who love you let things go. The wedding was planned for October, Thanksgiving weekend. She'd chosen a venue outside of Barrie, a converted barn property, ironically enough, with exposed timber beams and Edison bulbs strung across the ceiling. It was beautiful. I saw the photos of the space during the planning. I offered to help pay for flowers. She said no, they had it. I offered to help with the rehearsal dinner. She said they had it. Every time I offered, she said they had it, and I started to feel like I was being managed. I drove down to Barrie the Thursday before the wedding. I'd booked a room at the Holiday Inn on Dunlop Street. My daughter was already there, at the venue, running around with the coordinator. I texted her when I arrived. She texted back 2 hours later, said she was swamped, said we'd catch up at the rehearsal dinner Friday night. At the rehearsal dinner, I sat at a table with her 2 bridesmaids and their partners. My daughter was at the head table. She waved at me across the room when she came in. One wave. Then she was gone into conversations I wasn't part of. Her husband didn't acknowledge me at all. Not a handshake, not a nod. I told myself it was a busy night. I told myself that's just how weddings are. Saturday came. The ceremony was in the afternoon inside because the October wind had turned sharp. I wore the navy dress I'd bought at the Bay in September. I did my own hair. I sat in the 3rd row on the bride's side. When my daughter walked down the aisle on the arm of her uncle, my brother Gary, she was so beautiful I had to press my fingers against my mouth to hold myself together. She didn't look at me, she was looking at him. I told myself that was normal. You look at the person you're marrying. The reception was loud and warm and expensive. I found my name card at a table near the back. Table 11. I counted. The head table, the immediate family table, the grandparents' table, the bridal party tables, and then table 11. I was seated with people I didn't know. A cousin of the groom's from Mississauga, an old colleague of his. A woman who had gone to university with my daughter who I had never heard of in my life. I ate my salad. I talked to the woman from university. She was pleasant. She didn't know I was the mother of the bride until 20 minutes into our conversation, and when I told her, she looked uncomfortable in a way that made me feel something cold move through my chest. The speeches came. The best man, the maid of honor, the groom's father. My brother Gary stood up and said a few words about my daughter as a child, about how proud her mother was of her. He looked at me when he said that. I smiled at him across the room. He sat down. No one asked me to speak. I hadn't prepared anything because she hadn't asked me, and I had assumed she hadn't asked me because she was handling the program herself and had her reasons. I understood. Or I told myself I understood. Then they opened the dance floor. I went to find her. I wanted to congratulate her properly, hold her hands, look at her face up close. She was near the bar with her husband and a group of his friends. I waited at the edge of the group for a moment, smiling, until she noticed me. She stepped out and leaned close to my ear. "Mom," she said, can you give us some space tonight? You're kind of hovering and it's making things awkward." I pulled back and looked at her face to see if she was joking. She wasn't. "I'm not hovering," I said. "I came to congratulate you." "I know," she said, "and I appreciate it. But could you maybe just, I don't know, sit down, enjoy the open bar or something? People are noticing." "What people?" I said. She made a small, tight gesture with her hand. "Just people." I nodded once. I walked back to table 11. I sat down. I drank a glass of water. I sat for another 20 minutes, watching her on the dance floor, watching her laugh with her head thrown back, watching her husband put his hand on the small of her back. Then I got my coat from the coat check, found my brother Gary near the exit, told him I was tired and driving back to the hotel, hugged him, and walked out into the berry night air. I sat in my rental car in the parking lot for a long time. I didn't cry. I was past the crying. This was something else, a kind of settling, like when you've been cold for so long your body stops shivering and just goes quiet. I drove back to the Holiday Inn. I ate the granola bar from my purse. I watched television until the program went blurry, and I fell asleep with the lamp still on. The next morning, my phone rang at 9:47. I looked at the screen, my daughter. I sat up in bed and answered, "Mom." Her voice was different again, lighter, already moving on. "Hey." Good morning. So, I wanted to touch base about the Chelmsford property. I sat very still. We've been talking, she said, and honestly, we think the timing is really good right now. The guy my husband knows is still interested. He said the offer would be strong, and I was thinking maybe you could just sign the property over to me, and I can handle the sale from my end, and you'd obviously still see the money. Sign it over to you, I said. Just to make it simpler, less complicated for you to deal with. You wouldn't have to be involved with any of the. I was asked to leave the reception last night, I said. A pause. Mom, you weren't. I just asked you to give us a bit of space. You told me I was making things awkward and asked me to sit down. At my own daughter's wedding, at a table with people I had never met in my life. Another pause, shorter this time. I think you're being a bit dramatic, she said. It was one comment. I didn't ask you to leave. And the morning after, I said, you're calling me about the property. I'm just trying to. Mom, can we not make this bigger than it is? I just need to know if you'll work with us on this. I looked at the window. The curtains were the color of old bone. Outside, I could hear a transport truck idling on Dunlop. I need to go, I said. Mom, I'll call you later in the week. I hung up. I sat with the phone in my lap. The transport truck was still idling. Somewhere down the hall a door closed. I called my brother Gary. He answered on the second ring, and I told him everything. He was quiet for a while after I finished talking. Then he said, slowly and carefully, the way Gary always has said difficult things. Ruthie, I think you need to get yourself some proper advice. Today, if you can. I had a lawyer, a woman I'd used for my mother's estate back in 2009, sharp, no-nonsense, office in Sudbury's new Sudbury Center. I didn't know if she still practiced. I found her number in my phone contacts and called her from the hotel room. She still practiced. I drove back to Sudbury that Sunday, and I was in her office Monday morning at 9. I told her everything. The property, the developer connection, the request that I sign the property over to my daughter, the timing of the call, the morning after the wedding. She listened without interrupting. She wrote things down on a legal pad. When I finished, she put her pen down and said, You were right not to sign anything, and you were right to come here today. She walked me through my options carefully. She recommended we do 2 things immediately. First, we would confirm I had a proper will with clear instructions regarding the property and that the executor was someone other than my daughter. Second, and more importantly, she recommended we put the property into a trust, a family trust structure, with terms that protected it. It would still be mine. I would still benefit from it, but it couldn't be transferred, sold, or leveraged by anyone else without a very complicated legal process. Not a daughter, not a son-in-law, not a developer from Barrie. She also said something that has stayed with me. She said, When someone recommends you sign property directly to them rather than go through a proper legal process, that tells you something about what they're expecting you to do. Don't let urgency be a pressure tactic. I nodded. I thought about the tone of my daughter's voice on the phone, the lightness, the already moving on. We spent 2 hours in that office. I signed what needed to be signed. I asked every question I had. By the time I walked out, the property was in the process of being placed into a structure that my daughter's husband and his developer friend from Barrie could never touch. The week after, my daughter called again. So, she said, just that so. I've spoken with my lawyer, I said, a pause. And? The property is being handled, I said. It's going into a trust. It won't be sold. Not now. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I counted 4 seconds. "A trust," she said finally. Her voice had changed. The lightness was completely gone. "Whose idea was that?" "Mine," I said. "And my lawyer's. Mom, that's not what we discussed." "We discussed you asking me to sign my property over to you," I said. "The morning after your wedding, while I was still in the hotel where I'd gone, after you asked me to stop hovering." She made a sound. I don't know what I'd call it exactly. Frustration. Something brittle. "I need you to understand," I said, and I kept my voice level because I had practiced this in my car on the way to work and on the way home and in the shower and in the kitchen while the Tim Hortons went cold. "That I love you. I have always loved you. I have worked night shifts and eaten bad cafeteria food and driven on icy roads and done everything that needed to be done since you were 2 years old. That property was my mother's. It is mine now, and one day, if I choose, it may be yours, through proper channels, properly, with my name still attached to the decision. But I will not be signing it over to anyone, not under these circumstances." She didn't respond for a moment. Then, "Did Gary put you up to this?" "Gary told me to get proper advice," I said. "I did, so everyone is working against me now." "Your uncle loves you," I said. "Your uncle has loved you since you were born. That is not working against you. I thought you wanted what was best for me, and that was when something cracked open in me. Not broke, cracked, the way ice does in March when it sounds solid, but something underneath has already begun to shift." "What's best for you," I said slowly, "is not a question about my property. What's best for you is a conversation about what happened Saturday night. What's best for you is a conversation about why your husband's first priority after your honeymoon is land he doesn't own and has no claim to. What's best for you is asking yourself some questions I can't ask for you." Silence again. "I think I need some time," she said. "Okay," I said. "I'm not sure when I'll be ready to talk." "Okay," I said again. She hung up. I put the phone down on the kitchen table. Outside, through the window, the birch trees in the backyard had lost most of their leaves. Just the white trunks left, bare and still. November was about a week away. The ground would freeze soon. I called Gary that night and told him how it went. He said I'd done the right thing. I told him I wasn't looking for reassurance. I just needed to tell someone who knew the whole story. He understood that. Gary has always understood that about me. For a few weeks after, I kept myself busy the way you do when the alternative is sitting and thinking too much. I went out to Chelmsford on the weekends and walked the property. The barn needed a new section of roof before spring. I made a note to call someone in February. The vegetable garden was put to bed, the soil turned, covered with straw, the way my mother had taught me. The old apple tree near the fence line had dropped everything it had to offer and was standing there patient and bare-boned, waiting. I have always loved that apple tree. It was there before I was. It will probably be there after me. I thought about my daughter walking through that orchard when she was 9, filling a bucket with Max, eating more than she put in the bucket, juice running down her chin, laughing about something. I can't even remember what. And I let myself sit with that image for as long as I needed to. She is still that girl somewhere. I have to believe that. I didn't hear from her for almost 2 months. Then, the week before Christmas, she called. She didn't open with an apology exactly. She opened by saying that things with her husband had been difficult, that there had been conversations, that she had found out some things she hadn't known before. She didn't say what the things were. She didn't need to. I think I had understood them before she had. I'm sorry about the wedding, she said. What I said to you. I was stressed, and I was saying things that weren't coming from me, and that's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse, but I'm sorry, Mom. I was sitting at the kitchen table. Same cold-going coffee. I know, I said. The property, she started, is still in trust, I said. And it's going to stay that way. That isn't changing. I know, she said quietly. I'm not calling about that. And I believed her. We talked for an hour. We talked about my mother and the apple tree and the summer she was 9 and the Max. We talked about Gary. We talked about the holidays and whether she was coming up to Sudbury and whether I would make the roast she liked, the one with the root vegetables from the garden. She came for 3 days at Christmas. Her husband did not come. She slept in her old room. We walked the Chelmsford property on the 27th, just the two of us in our heavy coats and our boots. And she put her arm through mine on the gravel path, and we walked the whole perimeter without saying very much at all. The work of repairing things between us is slow. It is ongoing. There are still things unsaid. There may always be. But I know what I know now. I know that the people who love you genuinely do not place conditions on that love. I know that timing is not neutral. I know that someone who appears in your life as a protector can also appear, eventually, as something else, and that the clearest signal of that is often what they want from you rather than what they want for you. I also know that 14 acres of land in Chelmsford, Ontario, will still be there in the spring. The apple tree will blossom. The garden will go back in the ground. My mother's work, and her mother's work, and my own, all of it still standing. Some things you hold on to not because you're sentimental. You hold on to them because they are yours, because they were given to you by someone who loved you, and that love deserves more than a signature on a line. That is what I kept, not just the land.